This is a presentation of National Streaming Sports. Over 20 podcasters.
If you like the sweet science, get ready to talk boxing on the Gloved Fist podcast with top boxing writers Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch. Frank, a former amateur boxer out of Philadelphia, writes for NY Fights and can be seen on the Boxing Channel. Jack, an amateur boxer who competed in the New York Golden Gloves, was a 6-term president of the Boxing Writers Association. And now, here's Frank Latirzo and Jack Hirsch.
And we're back. Welcome to Glove Fists. My name is Frank Latirzo, former amateur fighter, former part-time writer, full-time observer, and I am joined by Mr. Henry Haskap. He is the co-host tonight, sitting in for Jack, and Henry goes by the name I've read of the uncrowned champ of sports information. Are you good with that, Henry?
Yeah, I used to be called that. I've been called better, a lot worse things.
A lot worse things than that. Henry, thanks for coming on tonight. This is the first time that we've ever spoke face to face. We've had interactions via email and over Facebook. And as I was telling Mac before, Jack and I we'll do a show and we'll debate who has a better chance to get in the Hall of Fame. Somebody like Jerry Quarry or Ernie Terrell. And a little while later, the next day, I'll get a message from you and you'll break down who they fought, how many top 10 guys they fought, how many top 10 guys they fought when they were in the top 10 or top 3, top 5. And I find that really interesting. So I want to pick your brain on some of that stuff. But before we get that, Henry, give me a basic background of your boxing as far as, obviously you love it. What drew you to it? How long you've been involved, and all the different things you've done?
Well, I got drawn to it when the first fight I ever saw. I was a foster child, and when I came back to my birth parents, they didn't have a TV until December of 1958. And my father, who was a much older man, he was in his 60s already. I was only like 10 years old. He said, "You're going to see one of the greatest fighters that ever lived tonight." And the TV wasn't that great. It was a black and white and squirrely. So I watched it, and this guy get knocked down 2 or 3 times in the first round. And I turned to him and I said, "I thought he was a great fighter." He said, "The fight's not over yet." It was Archie Moore and Von Durrell, which was the fight of the decade. And that kind of drew me right to boxing. And I became interested in it ever since. I used to like Louis Rodriguez as a kid.
One of my favorites.
Muhammad Ali, used to buy all the magazines and try to do like studying the fights. And then later on, I became involved with Ring 9, and then with the New Jersey Boxing Hall of Fame. I became president of the New Jersey Boxing Hall of Fame, and it's been 39 years now I've been president. And historian, I used to go to all the libraries and used to write down every fight I could find in microfilm, and I got like 25,000 fights, and thing was great. And it was all longhand, and they used to make records out of them, and I used to carry around this little plastic like suitcase with me, copies of all the records. And then one day I was at a Ring 9 dinner, and I was sitting there with a very older man and, a young man and his kid. And he asked me who I was. So I told him I'm a historian of the Ring 9, blah, blah, blah. And I asked him who he was. So he told me his name. And actually, the young man told me his father was a fighter. He said, "What's his name?" He told me his name. And I said, "Oh, wait a minute." I said, that's so-and-so? And he says, "Yes." And I said, "Didn't you fight at Jersey City Armory in 1937 or something like that?" And then I said, "Patterson Army, Laura Gardens." Yeah. And he got all excited. He said, "How do you know?" And I reached into my bag, and I happened to have his record right in front of me. It was all handwritten. It was like 50 fights he had. And I handed it to him. And you should have seen the face of them three. The father of the little boy, his eyes just opened wide, and you should have seen the grandson. He looked at his grandfather probably for the first time, saying, "Wow, this is my father, my grandfather. He did all this." And the old man, I forget the guy's name, but the old man, he actually started crying. He said, "Where'd you get this? Where'd you get this? Oh my God, all these memories. Oh, I remember this fight. Oh God." It gave me such joy.
Right.
I felt so good in my heart that I put a smile on this, guy who's probably in his 80s. And I just felt so darn good. And a lot of people, later on, like I'm known for being like the Grim Reaper. Like when somebody passes away, I let everybody know. I send out these massive emails to everybody. And then a lot of times I do the eulogy. I do a bell ceremony. I do a 9 count instead of a 10 because I feel a part of these people are still with us in their hearts of all their family, the friends, the fans. So I do a 9 count. It really took off. Everybody wants me to do it. I've done over 300 of them in my lifetime. And everybody asks me, why do I do that? I says, well, if you ever come to one of them, you're standing there in front of maybe sometimes just a few people and sometimes hundreds of people. A big church, is crowded, and you're standing there and you're talking about their relative that just died, and you're looking at the family, especially like grandkids and everything, and they got tears in their eyes and a smile on their face. And I'm saying, I don't do it for the money because I don't get paid a cent. I do it for that. You can't put a price tag on that. That's priceless. That look on their faces is just, I can't even begin to tell you how it feels. And sometimes
a couple weeks,
the fight, the families, I have nothing on. I have nothing on my grandfather. Do you have anything? Blank. I do all the research. There's one guy, I think his name is Doug Carter. They said he had nothing on him. I made up a scrapbook. The first page on the cover was him as an amateur posing. In the back page, it was him, either his wife or his daughter, and me getting the plaque for the New Jersey Boxing Hall of Fame. And inside was all the articles. I had like 50, 60 pages of articles on him, that he did throughout his whole career. And I made like 12 copies and I gave them out to everybody. And they were just, they say, man, it takes a lot of work. I said, yeah, but the smile on their face, the faces of those,
it means a lot to the families because how many places can they go where their loved ones were acknowledged like that?
Oh,
and it reminds me, I think it was the 27th of June this summer. Russell Peltz had a get together and he showed old fight films.
Yes.
Gypsy Joe, the guys of that ilk. And he had a couple, I showed the tape of Mike Picciotti and Pablo Baez. And Mike is no longer with us, but his family was there. Oh. And you could just see the joy in the family of them watching their grandfather, their father, and their uncle scoring this big win on ESPN over a guy that fought Tommy Hearns. And so I can see what you're saying and how great that is. And it's great that these guys get recognized like that. And I'd never been to any of your ceremonies, but I've heard about them. And the Grim Reaper, I don't know if I want to be remembered as the Grim Reaper, but it ties in to what you're doing. Let me ask you this. As I said earlier in the show, I've received emails from you and text, and you've given me a foundation when we look at fighters, who's Hall of Fame worthy, who isn't, and everybody argues about that, and they have a different criteria. And I know you and myself and a couple others, we were actually consultants on the IBROS top 20 fighters of every weight class. I know you corresponded with Monty Cox, as did I, and helped them with the ratings. Explain to the viewers out there exactly what you do and what you think it says. And if you want to use, if there's anybody in the top of your head, on the top of your head, like a Quarry, like a Terrell, break down their careers. Tell us how you do it and what you think it says about them as a guide to how good they were, how great they were, and who belongs in the Hall of Fame and maybe who doesn't quite make the cut.
Okay, years ago, I start writing down all the people that were rated in the top 10 by Ring Magazine. Right now, there's over 4,800 different fighters that are rated in the top 10. But I needed every magazine because, you know, you look at a guy's record, say, well, he beat 4 world champions, 2 Hall of Famers. But when did they beat him? If you beat Sugar Ray Robinson in 1965,
right,
you get credit for beating a Hall of Famer or the greatest fighter that ever lived. Do you get credit for that? So I said, geez, I wish I had all the ratings. And I start getting magazines, magazines, and I had about maybe 95%. And I made all kind of stuff out. But then this guy, Cliff Road, I guess his name is, he's from Ring Magazine. He had that 100 top fighters.
Clipper Roll.
Yeah. He had I start corresponding with him. There was a few, like, he made very few errors, but every once in a while I would see an error. I would write to him. He said, geez, and he corresponded with me, and we both went back and forth, and he filled in the gaps that I didn't have as far as who was rated when and where. So I said,
okay,
hey, it's not who you fought. It's when you fought them. So I made up a list of let's say, I'll go right here. It says, I rate everybody total fights against fighters that were rated in the top 10 by Ring Magazine at one time or another. I had that list all the while. And let's say Jerry Quarry. Jerry Quarry, he fought 24 fights against fighters that were once rated, and his record was 15-8-1. Ernie Terrell had 16 fights, and his record was 9-7-0. Now, I take it a step further. Total fights against fighters that were rated in the top 10 when they fought them. And that's more important than
that's probably the better metric. I agree.
And Quarry fought a total of 14 fights with a record of 8-5-1. Terrell fought 11 fights with a record of 7-4-1. It's pretty close there. Then I said the superstars. I would say the all-star team is the top 3. Total fights against fighters that were rated in the top 3 by Ring Magazine when they fought them. Quarry fought 8 fights. That's quite a few fights against top 3.
Guys were in the top 3.
Yeah, and his record was 3-4-1. Terrell fought only 4 fights, but his record was 3-1. So.
But Quarry's 4 losses are 2 to Ali and 2 to Frazier, right?
That's it. That's what I was going to say. It's and he beat like Mac Foster, Spencer, Lyle, Patterson. Shavers. Terrell
Mathis
beat Jones, Chevalo, Garcia, Foley, Williams, Foster, and Machen. If I had to rate them, I would say Quarry is much better. Maybe not much better, but he's better than the other guys that I just listed. So it's and if you want to rate Quarry against the people that went into the Hall of Fame this year, like I said, Quarry had 24 fights. His record was 15-8-1. Corrales had only 12 fights against guys that were ever rated, and his record was 7-5. Let's see, Cardeda had 14 fights, 10-3-1. Mora had 11-3. And if you go down to the next thing, when they fought, they were in the top 10. I already gave Quarry. He was 8-5-1. Corrales was 6'4", and Cardella was 6'3". Morrow was only 2'2", and Hatton was 7'2". Now the top three. This is, like I said, this is to me the all-star team. Of course, again, Quarry was 3-4-1. Corrales was 5'4", which is very good. Hatton was 4-1, which is very good. But the other two was 1-3 and 1-1. So how can you, Quarry was better than two of them. And if you look at who was nominated for the Boxing Hall of Fame this year, they put a guy. I'm not going to say his name, but he only had one loss in his career. He was a WBO champion forever, but when he was a champion, was more of a regional title. He only fought 2 top 10 contenders in his whole career, 2. And his record was 1-1. The guy he beat, I believe, was either rated number 8 or 9. And they put him, on the ballot. I mean, there's so many people that are much better than that guy, and even a few other guys. I mean, you have Iran Barkley, you got Castillo, you got Steve Collins, you got Chad Dawson, Vernon Forrest, Montello Griffin, Junior Jones, Zab Judah. I put down Jerry Quarry, Ramirez, and Marlon Starlin. I put down them guys. All them guys had better records
than the guy that went in.
Yeah, even the guy that got it in. I mean, it's just and they're not on the ballot, so it's it's very heart wrenching.
So your system, basically, if I understand it correctly, is basically if, say, Joe Schmo, somebody talks about, he's 46-2, but he didn't fight anybody.
Yeah.
Your system basically debunks that. And the only thing that your system really can't take into account, and it's kind of a wash if we use Quarry and Terrell, is how deep the error was.
Well, that's what I was going to get into. I do all this, let's say, for the modern class, I think we get like 42 names. So it's hard to break 42 names up, but I do. And I say, okay, I try to get it down to under 10. Then I say, okay, this guy, let's say a heavyweight, like Jerry Quarry was rated in the 1970s. Yeah. Now
he was rated from about 67 to 73.
Yeah, I mean, he
roughly.
He was an outstanding fighter. I mean, really an outstanding fighter. But if he was in the, let's say, 40s or 50s or even early 60s, he'd be even rated higher. He would probably he might even be a champion. If he was fighting today, he'd definitely be a champion. With all these,
4 titles.
Yeah, I mean, so you have to say, let's say a guy number 1 in 1952, he might not even break the top 10 in 1970s. I mean, so you have to consider that when you're doing your, let's say, research, because like you said, and I believe it was J. Russell Pulse, he brought that to my attention. But I already had that down, but he said that on one of the media sites, and he was absolutely right. You have to consider that
the error.
Yeah, consider the era, and also consider like the division. Like years ago, the junior divisions weren't really very popular, so you might be rated very high in the junior divisions, but let's say junior lightweight compared to lightweights was much better, people in that than the junior lightweight. So it's it goes.
Let me ask you this. I'm going to mention a guy who is very controversial as far as his record and where he stands in the all-time pantheon. So I want you to tell me where he's under your system. How does Rocky Marciano rank?
Well, Rocky Marciano, he's okay. Rocky Marciano, it took him a while to fight his first number one first contender. It took him 27 fights to fight his first top 10 contender.
Was that La Starza?
Yeah. And then 10 more to fight him again. During his whole career, he only fought 8 fighters that were rated in the top 10, a total of 11 times. But to his credit, he fought, when he was the champion, he fought the number one contender each time except for once. That was against
Cockle.
Cockle. He was number 2 contender. You know, everyone was number 1. So, and my thing on the first total, like all the champions that he, like everybody that was rated, you know, is very low for him. How many contenders did he fight when they were rated in the top 10? That was only 11. That's very, very low. But when it comes to the top 3, he's very high, you know, because he did fight, you know, a bunch of guys. I think I have it somewhere here, but he fought, 6, 7, 8, guys are either top, either the top contender or, or champion, so he's very hard to rate, in that, respect,
But what counts heavy for him is he defeated everybody he was supposed to defeat.
Yep.
Obviously.
Yep.
And if you look at Walcott and Charles, I'm not going to count Joe Louis because he was a fossil. But if you look at Walcott, Charles, and Moore, they weren't losing to other guys as conclusively as they lost to him. And
no.
all you can do, any fighter that is fight the guys of their era.
Yes.
So if Rocky's era was a little bit weak compared to, say, Ali's, it's like we really can't hold that against them. But sometimes what I do, I get into debates with guys. Well, who ranks higher, Frazier or Marciano? The case for Marciano is he never lost. The case for Frazier is he won the biggest fight probably in history against arguably the greatest heavyweight in history. And if you matched Frazier and he fought everybody Marciano fought the night Rocky fought them, would he be 49-0? I happen to think so.
I agree with you. It would be a heck of a fight. And you're right that Marciano did fight, in a little weaker position because Charles wasn't the same. Two things changed his life, as a fighter when he killed
Sam.
one guy. And
Sam
of course, the knockout of when he got knocked out by Walcott, because he really, he wasn't the same fighter, that he was back in, let's say, late 40s, early 50s. He just wasn't. And Walcott was, he was 38 years old, but he was still good.
Yes.
And Moore was very good, but even, Patterson destroyed him, but, I only wish that Rocky stayed around just a little bit longer. He was young. He was only early 30s when he retired. And, that would have put him a little bit maybe better on the Richter scale as far as people rating him. You can't just go by a record 49-0, 43 knockouts. It's who you fought, when you fought him. And like I said, he fought a lot of top 3 contenders, even champions and number 1 contenders, at the end of his career. And he can't help it that the era was weak.
You know what I really respect about him, Henry, is the fact that winning meant something to him. That undefeated record meant something to him. And we know how much he loved the dollar. And we know he turned down quite a bit of money to come back and fight Johansson or maybe even a Liston. And that says a lot to me because as much as he loved money, that record meant more. And that's why we talk about him today. And I think Marciano, like Tyson, is overrated in some circles and underrated in some circles. Would you agree with that?
I think you hit it on the head because he's probably the most overrated and underrated fighter in the heavyweight division. You know, overrated because everybody said, like Lou Duva. I was very good friends with Lou Duva. And he said, he's the greatest. He never lost. You know, he never lost. You know, that's all he would say. Al Serta was the same way. Never lost, never lost. You know, but you know
But we know what they have in common. They both had their last names ended in O. Yes, and that vowel carries a lot of weight.
Yep. I was going to say that. I was a member of Italian American Sports Hall of Fame. In fact, I was their historian, and I used to MC a lot of their events. And Tommy Lasorda and Lou Duva was always there. And, you know, you can't say too much about Rocky Marciano. Negative.
I know, Henry, I know that from my grandfather because my grandfather was like that. And he used to come to our house for dinner on Sundays, maybe 2 or 3 times a month. And at this time in 1969, I'm about 10 years old. And I would tease him. I'd say, Grandpa, you know, Al Lee would have peppered Marciano. He would have cut him up like a piece of salami. And he would literally get mad and he would yell at my father for letting me talk like that. And he hit my dad in the back of the head. And he says, what do you let him say that for? My dad goes, I don't know, Dad. He goes, he reads all those boxing magazines. He goes, I guess that's what they're saying now, that Ali's better. And it got so bad that one Sunday, my father came up to me at like 11 o'clock. He said, look, he says, Grandpa's coming over for dinner today. He goes, you can't tease him about Muhammad Ali. He says he thinks he's a draft dodger and nobody can beat Marciano. And your grandfather can't take a joke like that.
Yeah,
and I couldn't tease him.
I know. I was friends with Marciano's brother. He had a gym in Jersey City, Marciano's gym. And, you know, they had the unveiling of the Marciano stamp in Brockton and also in Jersey City. And in Jersey City, they, you know, his brother, Lou, he asked me to MC the event. And,
right.
know, a lot of people were there, and it was great. I mean, I got a big stamp of Rocky Marciano they gave me. But no, you know, you can't, you know, it's hard to downgrade a guy that's 49-0 with 43 knockouts. But, you know.
Let me ask you this. As long as you've been compiling records, and I don't know what you're going to say, I'm just going to tell you off of my reading and what I've gleaned over the last, I've been following boxing since, say, 64, 65. The question is, who has the most impressive record, any weight class of anybody you've seen? And I'll give you my guy, or who I say it is. And I would say, and again, I don't know what you're going to say, but I think Harry Greb.
You just took the words out of my mouth. You know,
I'm going to give you 3 guys: Harry Greb, Sam Langford, and Sugar Ray Robinson. Probably have the best resumes as far as beating the most elite fighters. Did I leave anybody out?
I couldn't hear you. I don't know. We went offline.
Okay.
It was Harry
Greb, Langford, and Robinson. When I look over records, I think they have the most impressive records as far as who they beat.
Well, Harry Greb, I think in 1919 he had like 45-0, and he fought 10 fights against Hall of Famers, and he beat them all.
In 1 year?
Yeah. And most people today, you know, I mean, most great fighters don't fight 10 Hall of Fame fighters in 1 year. I mean, in a whole career. Sam Langford, I mean, he started as like a featherweight. He went all the way up to
Right.
heavyweight. You know, the only thing against him is, you know, if you look at his record, they say he has 44 losses, but like almost 20 of them were against Harry Wills. I mean, he was a guy that Jack Dempsey said he was only afraid of one man, and that was Sam Langford. And Sam Langford was like 5'7",
Right.
and he was past his prime when Dempsey was the champion. But he said he was afraid of the guy. And Robinson, you know, I mean, you know, most people will say Sugar Ray Robinson, you know, he has the best, you know, he's pound for pound the greatest fighter that ever lived. If you look at my top three, who fought the most top three contenders, who beat most top three contenders, guess who's number one? Sugar Ray Robinson. He beat 23 contenders. Then it goes Archie Moore is the next, and Tony Canzoneri with 21, and Muhammad Ali is with 20. They're the only ones over 4. So Robinson, I mean, he started as a lightweight. He didn't get a shot at the title. Went to the welterweight, only got a shot. He won. And, a lot of people say he was the greatest welterweight that ever lived. And they always say Harry Greb. Well, there's no films of Harry Greb. Well, Robinson, I think there's only 6 highlight films of him as well.
Of the welterweight Robinson, right?
So how can you rate him, if you're doing that in the analogy, But, a lot of people, downgrade Greb because there's no film. But there's no film of, let's say, the Civil War. How do you know the Civil War took place? You read your stuff, and there are films of, let's say, people that he fought, like Tommy Loughran and Gene Tunney,
Right.
So you analyze it that way. And, he beat more Hall of Famers than anybody else in history. And he has a great record. Some people said he was a dirty fighter. And I said, well, show me the film. You say, how do you know he was a dirty fighter? But,
I think Langford and Greb are 2 guys that I don't have to see much film. And as you stated, we know who they beat and we know how great they were. And there are films of those guys. So when guys say, well, you know what? We never saw Greb. We don't know how good he is. We only saw a training video. I don't care. I know I saw Gene Tunney. I know how good he was and some of the other guys. And he was smaller than Tunney and probably should be at least 500 with him. So
Yes.
my next question is this. In your opinion, and you just said what the consensus is, I've maintained that Robinson is the greatest pound for pound fighter who has yet lived. And he could do everything all the other greats before or after him could do. But there's a lot of things he could do they couldn't do. And the only knock on him was he wasn't as good as Whitaker or Mayweather defensively, but he also stood in the kill zone to knock you out. And when you fight in that range with that mindset, you're going to get hit somewhat.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Ibro voted him number 1. I put him number 1, Greb number 2. Armstrong was up there, Ali, Sam Langford. That was my top 5. So, if you say anything but Robinson, you don't know nothing about boxing, But
our buddy Jack Hirsch argues with me on this show sometimes that Robinson is the consensus, and he gets mad when I say, "Look, the debate starts with who's number 2."
Who does
and Jack doesn't. He kind of, he goes at me.
Who's his number 1?
I'm not sure if he's ever said Henry, but I know this much: whoever it is, he ranks below Robinson.
Yeah, well, I agree. It's somewhat. The things are that Sugar Ray was like in a class of his own. When you're
he could do everything.
Yeah. He
what couldn't he do?
Nothing. I mean, he fought Maxim. He got beat by him because of the heat.
Spotted him 16 pounds in that heat.
Yep. But like I said, he was one of the. he's consensus as the greatest fighter that ever lived by just about everybody. You know, anybody that really knows boxing. You know, he's number one.
Let me ask you this: do you have a problem because Sugar Ray Leonard finished number 2 at welterweight? Do you have a problem with that? I don't.
No, they say Henry Armstrong. You know, it was up there. The reason why Henry Armstrong, he won 3 titles at the same time. You know, he defended his welterweight title 19 times, more than anybody else. Okay, but can you guess how many top 10 contenders he fought in those 19 bouts? Want to take a guess?
By the way you're saying that, I'm not thinking it's a high number.
No, it's not.
And what was the number?
I'll tell you what it is. It's
Don't
5.
tell me 0.
5.
5 out of 19.
And 3 of them, the guys weren't rated as welterweights. They were rated as lightweights. So he only fought 2 welterweight contenders during that 19 bout win streak. But I still rate him as one of the greatest because, you know, he did fight, you know, he did win 3 titles, you know, and he was a small guy. In fact, most of the time when he fought his welterweight title, he was a lightweight. He was like
Right.
135, 136. So, you know, I rate him really, he should be rated as a lightweight more than a welterweight. Sure.
And in all fairness to him, he could have had the middleweight title except for a draw with Garcia.
Yeah. But that was a sectional title. That wasn't, everybody thinks it's the real,
Okay, I didn't realize that. It wasn't the okay.
Well, it was, but I mean, it was just recognized by a few states like New York and I think Pennsylvania or something like this. But, but still, he beat Garcia a few years before, and defending his welterweight title. So it's as far as Sugar Ray Leonard goes, he doesn't do as good on some of the lists I have. Okay, but
because he only had 40 fights.
Yeah, but he, like Sugar Ray Leonard. Oh, Sugar Ray Leonard. He fought 21 fights against top 10 contenders when he was 17-3-1. Against top 3 contenders, he was 6-2-0. But this is where the criteria comes in with him. He beat 4 of the greatest fighters there ever was. And
he was lucky that the opposition was there to test himself.
In Duran and Hearns and Benitez and Hagler. I mean, that puts him like a step up. That's why
he covered a lot of ground in 40 fights. Is basically what we're saying.
This is like my ratings here, not actually ratings. I just look at this and I get the cream to the top. If you listen to let's say 42 names on the modern class ballot, it's hard to go through all 42. But if you have a list like this, you can narrow it down to under 10. Then you got to use your common sense. Like if Leonard was on there, he might not make the top let's say 10. He probably would, but let's say he didn't, or say he would just barely make the top 10. But fighting guys that he fought and that he beat puts him the step up. So you would give him that consideration, and he'd probably get in over some of these other greats.
All right, now I would be remiss if I didn't ask you this.
What boy? Here it
comes. No. This is the shirt I'm wearing. Everybody can see who's on it. Ali fighting Frazier in the second fight, says the GOAT. You said before we went on the air, I don't know how it came up in conversation, but you said Ali's your favorite fighter of all time?
Yes.
Okay. Do you rank him as the greatest heavyweight of all time?
Yes, he has the greatest resume. If you look at my stats, he has the best of any heavyweight that ever lived. And if you
look at his record, there was a lot of times if you took the ring top 10 guys, he fought at least 9 of them.
He fought 10 of them. I could show you a list.
See, in 73?
Yeah, probably 72. If you look at the list of he fought every one of those top 10 guys. There's only one other fighter in boxing history that can say that. And I bet you nobody would know who it is. And it's not.
Give me the weight.
Light heavyweight.
Archie Moore.
No.
Okay.
Okay. Slappy Maxie Rosenblum.
The guy had 19 knockouts and 140 wins or whatever.
Yeah, he fought almost 300 fights. He fought 172 fights against people that were rated in the top 10 at one time or another. And he fought 85 fights against guys that were rated at that time. And he won 46 of them. He holds the record of beating more top 10 contenders than anyone. That's Maxie.
And what was it that you said about Ali? He's the only fighter to ever what?
I forget where we were.
about his record?
Yeah. Oh, he's the only fighter besides Maxie Rosenblum.
Okay.
To beat all these guys. But if you look at the top 10, even with Ibro, who's in the top 10? You got George Foreman, you got Frazier, you got Liston. Ali beat all three of them. There's no other heavyweight that can say that. Marciano, he beat two that were in the top 20. That's actually, if you count Lewis, but Ali beat those three guys. I mean, they're all in the top 10. And also, if you say who's the greatest punchers, you have Liston, you have Foreman, you got Ernie Shavers, you got Frazier, you got a whole
Lyle.
Yeah, Lyle. I mean,
Cleveland Williams.
All them guys, so they say, well, Marciano would have knocked him out. He didn't get knocked out by Shavers or Liston or
Foreman or Frazier.
Yeah. So, he had a dynamite chin. I just think he has the best resume of any heavyweight champion ever. And they says, okay, pound for pound. Now, pound for pound, when you're a fighter, like let's say heavyweight, well, usually they're noted for their punch. Ali wasn't noted for his punch. He was noted for his speed. Now, reduce him from 210 pounds down to maybe 160 or 147. How much faster would he be? I mean, Jim Jacobs, the guy that did all the films, he timed Ali's left jab.
He said it was faster than Robinson's.
And Robinson. I mean, how fast would it be if he was at 160 or 147? He'd be even faster. So he has to be in a conversation on the pound for pound list. Just from that, alone. But
do you think
there's a longevity too? Right.
Do you think that we missed out on the best Ali?
Oh yeah. But the thing is that, let's say it did happen, there might not have been a Joe Frazier.
I know where you're going. Go ahead.
Maybe 1969. Yeah, in 1969, there might not have been a George Foreman. Because he would have he fought a lot when he was a heavyweight champion. I laughed at some of these commentators. They would say, "Oh, this guy had a very active year. He fought 3 times." 3 times.
Ali fought 6 in 72.
Yeah, I mean, you gotta, but his best years, you never, you can't get it back. But I think it worked out for him because he came back and he fought the best. Like Foreman was a champion, he beat him. Frazier was a champion. He wasn't champion when he fought him, but he beat him, and he beat Lyle, and he beat all these other guys, and his resume just exploded. Like if he fought during the time he was out, Joe Frazier might be just one of them, just like Jerry Quarry, might be a top contender.
Henry, if you think about it, Ali's exile and losing to Frazier the first time probably were the best things to ever happen to him, because looking back, let's just say if he's never exiled, he probably fights Frazier in 69. late 69. Can we agree?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's just say, and he's better than we ever saw him before. And we know Frazier isn't as good in 69 as he was in 71. So Ali beats Frazier by a decision. And people come away saying, well, you know what? Frazier really didn't beat anybody. He wasn't that great. And then next up would be Foreman. And where would Foreman's big win be? Beating George Chuvalo or Miguel Perez and guys like that? So he wouldn't have got credit for beating Foreman. But what happened was the exile, the comeback, when he loses to Frazier, because of the nature of the fight and how competitive it was, no one could deny that Frazier was great. And Ali, even after not fighting for 43 months, if you didn't know that, you wouldn't say that guy's been out of the ring for 43 months. He also fought a great fight. So losing to Frazier established Frazier as a great, an all-time great. And then when Foreman came along and he mutilates Frazier, well, he beat a guy Ali can't beat. So that put Foreman up there, and it gave Ali 2 dragons to slay, and he did.
Yeah.
And so that helped him where his resume would have been questioned had he never been exiled.
Well, that's what I try to say, but you said it much better, because like I said, if he fought from, he didn't have that layoff, there would not have been, Joe Frazier would have been just a contender. So George Foreman, and all his resume would have went down, Muhammad Ali's. Like you said, who did he fight? Who did Frazier fight? Who did Foreman fight? At that time. So,
and if Ali never comes back after Zora Foley, if we go back and look at his record, who's the marquee win other than Liston?
You're right. You're right. That's what I always tell people. He fought actually better people. He was a better fighter in the 60s, but he fought a lot better people in the 70s.
Now I'm going to throw something at you that I love to throw Ali fans. And remember, I'm one of you. Here's my question. Okay. Was there a version of Ali that we saw 64 to 67, 70 to 75 that would have beaten Frazier of 71? My contention is, even though I rank Ali higher, and I think, had there's been no exile, Ali probably wins. But I'm not sure if I ever saw a version of Ali who would have beat that Joe Frazier in 1971, because in my opinion, I think that Smokin' Joe was better prepared physically, strategically, and psychologically, better prepared for one fight than any other fighter who has lived. And I'm not sure Ali beats him any version on March 8th.
Yeah. Well, you might be right. There's no way of proving it. But, the Ali that, in the 60s, late 60s, he was just faster than he was in 1971. He was younger.
But he was still faster than Frazier in 71. So how much of a difference would that make?
He was a lot faster. If you compare him in 67 and to 71, I mean, he had more stamina. When you're off 3.5 years, it's a lot. I mean, he lost. I concede he lost, but it would have been a lot closer. I think Ali would have somehow pulled it out. But I'm not saying you're wrong. Because
I'm going to give you my counter argument, and I'm not arguing with you. I'm just bringing this to light. George Chuvalo, who's not as fast as Frazier, who is easier to hit, he's more upright, he's not as good offensively. He tagged Ali a lot in 1966 to the body and some to the head for 15 rounds, and he took the fight on 17 days' notice. So my point is this. If Chuvalo could force 66 Ali against the ropes and corner him, I'm confident that Frazier of 71 would have been as successful or more. What would you say to that?
Well, I think you might agree with this. Ali took each fight differently. If he was fighting George Foreman, he trains a certain way. If he was fighting a guy like Joe Frazier with his record and everything, I think he would have been in much better shape to elude those punches. I know you're talking about a lot of body punches, and Ali was one of these guys that would let them hit him. Hit me in the body. I mean,
I just think stylistically, Henry, I just think Joe had the stylistic advantage where he never had to change or adapt to Ali. Ali had to adapt to him. And if you had to construct a guy to beat Ali and with the right mindset, I think it was Frazier. It's a great argument. We'll never know. They fought 41 rounds. I think I scored all 41 rounds. I think I have it 21-19-1 in favor of Ali. And to me, Ali really separated himself from Joe in the last 3 rounds of Manila. Because if you take out the 12th, 13th, and 14th rounds, and you can watch their 3 fights, it's pretty even as far as who got the best of it. But those last 3 rounds, Ali's size just seemed to be a little too much for Joe, and Joe had to take too many shots to get in.
Yeah, that's a good argument, And I really like Joe. He's a great fighter.
I love them. Let me ask you this: do you watch boxing today? Do you watch the current guys?
Yeah, I watch them, and not as much as I used to. Because it's a lot of these things are on pay-per-view. I mean, I get them all, but I'm not. I don't. I mean, there's some good fighters out there. Crawford and Canelo, and the little guy, the monster over there. I like watching them. It's just the smaller fights that they don't interest me as much.
All right, I want to get to 2 more points, and I hope we can have you back again because I don't know about you, but I'm having a lot of fun.
Oh, good.
Okay, the one point is now. How did I just lose that? How did I just lose that point?
I thought you were going to bring up Mayweather.
I'm going to get to him, but there was one point I wanted to touch on before that. Oh, okay. I get into arguments with certain guys that, let's just say there's a hypothetical fight. Let's just say it's Emil Griffith versus Terrence Crawford or whatever. And I know that there are some guys, just because Griffith was the older guy who fought in the 50s and 60s and into the 70s, automatically are going to discount anything that a guy like Crawford did. And then I know there's other guys that will always go with the modern guy. So my point is, where do you come down on that? Because I don't like when there are guys today that fight that are all-time greats that could go back to any era, but I know that it's also watered down today, and there's not as many great guys.
Oh yeah, it's much watered down. I mean, years ago they had boxing gyms, 10 in one city.
Every corner.
Yeah, it's just it's a different era. I mean, Emil Griffith, I became pretty good friends with him. In fact, I did his eulogy when he died, and
one of my all-time favorites.
Yeah, he was a great fighter, and I tell you, talking about a guy that was fan friendly. I mean, he would go around, talking to every little kid, taking pictures, sparring with him. I mean, he was just a joy to be with. I mean, it's hard to compare, different eras. I mean, they fought a lot more years ago. Nowadays, Crawford was the first fight just this year. I mean, he didn't fight in over a year. I mean, he's probably going to, he's probably one of the best fighters right now in the thing. I think Shakur Stevenson is probably going to be, I mean, I knew him since he was 5 years old. His grandfather used to bring him to the fights when he was an amateur, before he was an amateur. And he was always the same way. And like when he fought, he was defensive. He's not let's say a fan-friendly fighter. He's but he's one of the best. Right now, as far as you can't hit the guy.
Right. I thought he would come. I thought he would have progressed a little bit more, but look, we know there are reasons for that.
Yeah.
And we can't hold that against him. All right, let's get to the coup de grace. Jack tells me that you're a big Mayweather guy.
Well, I just think he's like Marciano in a way. He's overrated and he's underrated. And I'll tell you the way I have my facts. Okay, he had 50 fights. Okay, if you want to say 49, you can say 49. In fact, if you say 49 is actually his ratings go up. But let's say he had 50 fights. He fought 23 top contenders, that were rated in the top 10 when he fought them. And he beat them all. That's 46% of his fights. He beat a top 10 contender. That is second all time on any Hall of Famer.
How many top 3 guys did he fight?
He fought Pacquiao. I'm just, let me get my list out first, and then you can.
Okay.
Then he, he also fought and beat 16 top 3 contenders. They were rated they were rated in the top 3 when he fought them. That's 32% of the fights. Let's see, that ranks second, only to Ali. And if you go by, let's say, fighting a champion or fighting a number 1 contender, he fought 11 times against either a champion or a contender, and that's 22%, which is higher than anyone else in boxing history. And if to take it a step further, when they were rating people like in Ring Magazine, a lot of times the title was vacant. So actually, the champion was number 1 at that time, not a champion. They didn't, for some reason, they didn't have a champion. The champion was just number 1, and number 2 contender was number 1 contender was number 2. If you adjust that to this segment, he fought 18 times against either a world champion or a number 1 contender when he fought him. I mean, that's 36% of his fights. I mean, that's more than anybody else in history. I mean, it's not even close.
But how about when he fought those guys?
Well,
what are his Henry? What are his signature wins? If you look at the biggest names on his record, every guy except Corrales and Canelo were defeated more conclusively than they were by Mayweather, and he struggled with some of those guys. He retired to avoid Paul Williams. He waited at Pacquiao out. I think he really cherry picked a lot, and I don't think he tested himself. I actually think if he would have tested himself more, he might even rate higher.
Well, he did beat guys like Pacquiao. Okay, he beat Canelo, he beat Cotto, he beat Mosley, he beat Hatton, he beat De La Hoya.
But all those guys you're naming, Henry, I can say they were beaten more conclusively. So why does Mayweather stop the world?
They were still up there in a contendership. Pacquiao was rated number 1. Alvarez, he was the champion at the time. Cotto, he was number 1. Mosley, he was number 2. Hatton, he was a champion. De La Hoya actually was number 5 at the time.
But Henry, they move guys into certain positions when they sign for certain fights too, to make the fight bigger.
No, that's the sanctioning bodies do, not Ring Magazine. Ring Magazine, they don't do that. I'll give you another, for instance. He was 50-0. His average record of the fighter he fought out of the 50 fights was 28-4. That's one of the highest. It's actually a little higher than Muhammad Ali. So he, you can't, argue with facts. And who would you rather see fight? Let's say Mayweather against Paul Williams or Mayweather against Toro Gotti.
Mayweather against Paul Williams. Easily.
I would say Gotti because he's more exciting. Do you think that would have been an exciting fight against Paul Williams?
No, but most of Mayweather's fights weren't exciting. And we know Gatti is a level below those guys. Gatti was not.
No, I
was
agree.
He wasn't elite.
But even with Pacquiao, now they should. Granted, they should have fought 4 years before, maybe 5 years before. They would have.
I mean, Marquez knocked Pacquiao out before he fought him.
I know, but they would have got maybe $100 million. They waited 4 or 5 years, and guess what? They got $300 million. Boxing is not only a sport, but it's a business now.
Absolutely.
And Mayweather, I was at a meeting with the AIB. I was sitting at Steve Acunto's house, and God rest his soul, and Malvina Lathan was across from me, and she was talking about a fight that's coming up with Mayweather, that she was the commissioner at the time. He said, what a businessman. He's the best businessman boxer I've ever.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely. And with that, Henry, we have to go.
Well,
sorry to cut you off. We could talk for hours. This was so much fun.
I like the Hall of Fame back there. Huh?
That look, I like that is really cool.
It is. Yeah. But
I want to, Henry. Thanks for coming on.
This
was a blast. And I hope we can do it again.
Of course. Just tell Jack to get back and get on this thing again.
All right, Henry. Thanks so much.